March 9th is the anniversary of the first discovery of gold in California, which caused the American Civil War. It's a powerful illustration not just of the law of unintended consequences, but the law of unanticipated consequences. And to me, this rather odd business proves the importance of basing your conduct on principle, precisely because you cannot foresee the outcome of specific events and actions. The discovery of gold happened, as I say, on March 9th, back not in 1849, despite the name of the San Francisco football team, but in 1842. And it was discovered in a California that was then under the Mexican government, as a result of which nothing happened. But then you had the Mexican-American War. California was ceded to the United States. More gold was found in January of 1848, and it triggered a gold rush. Now, things happened differently in those days. The discovery of gold wasn't confirmed until March. Word of it didn't reach the east coast of the United States until August. The discovery wasn't confirmed formally by the president in front of Congress until December of 1848. But once word got out, people headed for California in droves, some 300,000 of them. And when I say headed to California, it was not an easy undertaking. The overland route was so long and difficult that most of them actually went by sea, even though there was no Panama Canal. You had to go around Cape Horn, around the southern tip of South America. It took months. Your teeth would fall out from scurvy, all sorts of things like that. But people went, some 300,000 of them. And thus, despite the fact that California might seem closer to the American South, it was mostly Yankees who went there. If you look at electoral maps of the United States to this day, you'll notice that California votes like New England. Well, it's because it was initially populated substantially by New Englanders. What does all this have to do with the Civil War, you ask? Well, the United States, of course, by the late 1840s was very divided on the question of slavery. Letting in new states was very difficult business. You had to let in a free state and a slave state at the same time. Otherwise, the balance in Congress might tip and Americans might come to blows. Nobody thought there were going to be new states coming out of the land taken from Mexico for years, but because of the gold rush, California applied for statehood within 2 years, and a decision had to be made. And statesmen stepped up, and they created a great compromise, exactly the sort of thing people think you need in a crisis. But unfortunately, a compromise necessarily means subordinating principle to expediency. And so the great statesmen of the day came up with the Compromise of 1850. And the terms of this compromise were, first of all, California was admitted as a free state. But secondly, instead of excluding slavery from other territory taken from Mexico, you would have what's called popular sovereignty. Whoever got there first and organized a government and had a vote and created a state constitution would get to decide. And so this led to a rush of a different sort into the unorganized territories, not of people looking to make a living for themselves, either through honest farming or through getting lucky and finding gold, but instead to make sure that it was a slave state or a free state, and they came to blows. As part of the Compromise of 1850, you also had, they banned the slave trade in Washington, D.C. It seemed indecorous to have it in the nation's capital, and they passed a new and more stringent fugitive slave law. And that new and more stringent fugitive slave law, which required Northerners to cooperate in the returning of freed slaves, so outraged a woman that she wrote a book. The woman was Harriet Beecher Stowe. The book was Uncle Tom's Cabin, a runaway bestseller, unimaginably popular given the conditions of the time, and it very much helped harden sentiment in the North against the South and the ghastly institution of slavery. Then, as I say, you got actual open warfare in places, bleeding Kansas. The Compromise of 1850 not only inflamed feelings, it inflamed combat, and the nation hurtled toward the confrontation of the Civil War. Now, the Civil War didn't happen because there was gold in California. It happened because there was slavery in the South. But California becoming a state so rapidly triggered a confrontation in which the great and the good of the United States subordinated principle to pragmatism and thus failed to prevent the disaster. It's easy to say from this distance, and I don't think I'm going to get a lot of argument, but the fact remains the only thing to do about slavery was to insist upon its abolition. It was the only way to prevent it from causing a disaster. And that's exactly what they didn't do in 1850 when California made the issue suddenly far more pressing. They thought they could just stall, then they decided to compromise. Neither of those was the right plan. And so it was that the discovery of gold in California managed to cause the Civil War, not because gold directly caused people to become violent, but because it triggered a series of events in which principle was buried underneath what seemed to be practicalities and weren't. You can't know what's going to happen. Weird things, strange chains of cause and effect take place regularly in history. And so when you find yourself dealing with what often looks like this bloomin' buzzing confusion, you know what you have to do? You have to do the right thing, confident that that will turn out better than the alternatives. Certainly, it would have been the right plan in 1850, and sadly, it was not adopted. Now, if you're enjoying these commentaries, please visit my website, that's www.johnrobson.ca, make a monthly pledge to help support my work, and keep watching The Rebel, subscribe to The Rebel, where you're going to get news and commentary you won't find anywhere else.